Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with constant real-time odds in action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA, college basketball, the NHL, and even UFC. Head to betonline.ag today and don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. The quarterfinals of the College Football Playoff are upon us on New Year's Eve at 7:30 p.m. Eastern in Phoenix, Arizona. It's the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State versus Boise State. Penn State was able to clear SMU in the first round. Boise State had themselves a first round bye as the champions of the Mountain West Conference. This is another situation where, at least on paper, most of the pundits, most of the national and local experts are looking at this and saying that Boise State is the inferior opponent to Penn State. According to our friends at BetOnline, Penn State has a spread advantage of -11, and that could fluctuate in the coming days since the time of this recording, so keep an eye on that. But this looks like it's strongly in favor of Penn State. We're going to dive into how Penn State's defense handles Heisman candidate Ashton Jeanty, star running back who could break Barry Sanders' record for most rushing yards in a single season in FBS against Penn State. And also on the flip side of things, how does Penn State find ways to score and be effective offensively against what is a pretty good Boise State defensive line? They do have some deficiencies, so we're going to dive into all that. Justin, first of all, happy holidays, happy New Year. All of this, this is fun this time of year. This is when everything really gets ramped up, college football and New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. You know what this big bowl game environment feels like. Penn State touchdown in Phoenix yesterday and undergoing media, some practice. How do you compartmentalize? How do you focus on the task at hand when you have all this glitz and glam around?
Well, it's interesting because this is a little different, right? Even though it's the Fiesta Bowl, it's a playoff game. So
right.
There aren't any co-team type of events or like bowl hosted events. It's just like practice going to go play. So I know that the setup this time is a little bit different. That keeps it easier to focus on the task at hand, which is the game. Because when we play, at the Orange Bowl, half the guys are worried about going to the NFL. Depending on how the other team, they might not have. Like, we didn't have curfew. It was just we had early practice.
That's dangerous. Yeah.
But we had an early practice, so it was like, treat you like an adult, you better act like an adult type situation. So, so like we had certain things that were put in place to make sure the task was at hand. And, we're a competitive group. But now it's a game. It's just kind of masked in the Fiesta Bowl, the wrapping paper per se. But, I think it's pretty awesome to see, to play in the first Fiesta Bowl in the College Football Playoff. And I think all this whole run is going to be historic when we look back on it from some time now. But I think it's just more serious and focused in on the task at hand when you got to deal with your backup quarterback hitting the transfer portal, like all the new dynamics that are happening right now. It sends if you're going to focus on anything, the playoffs is what you need to focus on.
Yeah, it's the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. Shout out to my buddy Big E, Tori Ewan, who is the chief Fiesta officer, the CFO for the Fiesta Bowl. So he's having a lot of fun down there in Phoenix, Arizona. It's not quite the Pop-Tarts Bowl where it is, to your point, all of the extravaganza around it. Oh, and by the way, there's a game.
Or the Snoop Dogg Bowl.
Oh, yeah, that's LA, right? Yeah. This is the sponsor.
Yeah. Or the Snoop Dogg Bowl. I mean, like those are harder to focus on. Like you're harder
Yeah,
to stay
for a
locked
number of
on.
reasons with Snoop. Shoot. All right, let's start off with the most pivotal matchup that you can look at in this game. Penn State's defense up against Boise State's offense. Boise State running back Ashton Jeanty was a Heisman hopeful. Obviously, that award went to wide receiver / cornerback Travis Hunter from Colorado. A lot of people thought Ashton Jeanty should have gotten it. Ashton Jeanty, I believe, is exactly, let me find the number here, 132 yards away from breaking Barry Sanders' record for most rushing yards in a single season at the FBS level. Ashton Jeanty has rushed for 2,497 yards, 29 rushing touchdowns, along with 77. He's averaging 7.3 yards per carry. Justin, those are gaudy numbers. You and I talk about it all the time. However, stats don't always tell the entire story. It's Jimmys and Joes versus X's and O's, that sort of thing. But Jeanty appears to be for real. What's your evaluation of the player?
I mean, to put up that type of production, in high school recruiting, I'm always saying that it's the how over the what, you know what I mean? But when you start playing top level competition or you're in college football, you start putting up, you say, gaudy numbers, and he's not like at a D3 school. He's still playing FBS talent. That level of consistency at that clip is extremely impressive, regardless of who you are, because that means you have to be doing essentially everything right throughout a running play, right? And accounting for one or two players. And that's an individual type of thing. So he's got to be a special player. I mean, second in the Heisman votes, over 2,000 yards rushing, hard tackle. Sometimes people question his speed. I mean, I don't know why, but he just never gets caught. Pretty highly ranked recruit as well coming out. So it wasn't like he just kind of popped out of nowhere. But it's going to be interesting. He's a good running back, and we'll have to gang tackle and get him down and hopefully not let him take over the football game.
5'9", 215 pounds is what he's listed at out of Jacksonville, Florida. You do scratch your head. How the hell did this guy get out of the state of Florida and somehow land in Boise, Idaho? But he has lit up the Mountain West Conference, as has Boise State. And that's been kind of the question about this team now going into the playoff, is that strength of competition that they've faced. And a lot of people have pointed towards their performance against Oregon. I believe it was in September, nearly knocking off the Oregon Ducks. So there's been a conversation of, well, they nearly did that. Maybe they can take out Penn State. That's, I think, at least a valid argument. But when you take a look at the way that Penn State is constructed versus the way that Oregon team was constructed at the time, I think two things. One, Oregon has evolved and gotten better as the season has gone on. Correct. Jeanty got his rushing yards against Oregon. What we learned as Penn State fans and us covering the team is in that Big Ten championship game, Penn State put nearly 300 yards rushing on that Oregon defense. And that defensive line for Oregon, as talented as it is, as many top recruits as they have, star ratings, all that sort of stuff, their gift is pass rushing, and their gift is not necessarily stopping the rush. So I'm not saying I'm ruling out everything that Jeanty and Boise State did against Oregon way earlier in the season, but you kind of have to wipe the slate clean in this respect. And you do have to look at what Penn State did just this last round against SMU in terms of the defensive performance. It was dominant. I think Boise State presents a stronger problem for Penn State than SMU, but I defer to you. What do you feel about that?
Boise presents a stronger problem than SMU does.
I think a stronger offensive unit.
Yeah, I think they have more of a bread and butter on the running back, right? When you can turn around and hand it off to a workhorse like that and gain most of your offense, like you said, have some type of movement on the outside. Yes, and it's like, again, we do well up front with the front seven. We got an All-American in Abdul up there, so it's a matchup type of situation, right? Even though they might be statistically better, just overall, what they're good at, I think we're also good at when it comes to like stopping that type of run, right? In the sense of, I still think we're okay on the edges, okay the back end against the receivers and things of that nature. But yeah, I think as long as we continue to contain Jeanty, I think we should be okay on defense.
The way Penn State's defensive line played against SMU was elite. It was incredible. Abdul Carter was playing angry. Denied Dennis Sutton had a fantastic game. Zane Durant, Devon J. Thomas. I mean, the list goes on and on. Seriously, Penn State's front four really killed SMU throughout that game. I don't know what you've heard from internally within the program, but Abdul Carter has kind of made it pretty clear he's pissed that he didn't win Defensive Player of the Year in all of college football. What have you heard coming out of the program, and what have you heard potentially about Abdul, the way that he's playing, the way that this team is motivated, especially defensively?
I mean, I think kudos and hats off to him that he's like you said, locked in when he can be a future top 10 pick, right? Like these are the guys that have the distractions when it's like, all right, I can opt out, kind of save my body, do these different type of things. And it's like, no, he's playing with his hair on fire. So I think that's kudos to him as someone that is like making football and this team a priority moving forward with everything else that he's got going on, just career wise. But so like from that standpoint and him playing angry, I think I'm more impressed by that because again, the profile of the player at that stature is you have to keep them locked. You have to keep them locked in because there's, the real bag, as they would say, just a couple months away.
Right. In terms of Penn State's defensive performance against SMU, kind of reflecting on that game, what did you like about the way Tom Allen put that game together?
Well, I mean, I think that we did a good job, again, first stopping the run and then containing their weapons on the outside. Once they weren't able to move the ball, I think, and make it one-dimensional, it makes it pretty easy to call a defense or an offense once a team is one-dimensional. Just keeping them unbalanced is the tricky part of football. But when you can, like, dial your stuff in and just say, hey, beat me this way, and you have a nice plan for it, which I think we did against SMU, come out with a pretty lopsided victory.
If you were in Tom Allen's shoes, how would you attack this Boise State offense, specifically Ashton Jeanty? You and I have talked about it a little bit. Is like, hey, is this something where you put 7, 8, 9 in the box?
I try to stop. I mean, I try to stop him with seven in the box, or sometimes give him 6 books and send some blitzes and then different spaces, and put the onus on our DBs to cover just across the board. The linebackers are playing some really good football. Again, playing some strong gap football. So yeah, again, a lot of man situations. Anytime 6 in the box, have some different zone looks or zone blitz looks from that standpoint to just keep them honest, and hit them where their attack points are from a run game. Like stopping the run would be my number one priority in this whole situation, and letting our skill and just talent advantage kind of reign supreme on the outside in the skill areas.
My big question going into this is more so for Boise State. If you can't get Ashton Jeanty going with the conventional running game, because I expect them to give him the ball minimum 20 times with a conventional handoff, right?
You would hope so, yeah.
If that's not working and Penn State is limiting Boise State, then do you have enough offensively to actually threaten Penn State? My gut says no. Looking at Boise State quarterback Maddox Madsen, this is not a bad quarterback by any means. 2,700 yards passing, 62% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, safe with the football. He can scoot a little bit, 224 yards rushing, and 5 rushing touchdowns. So it kind of like that stat line is eerily similar to what Drew did last year. And if you think about, they're very different athletes. This is a very small, compact quarterback, about 5'10", a little over 200 pounds. Maddox Madsen is somebody that could throw you one, as you like to say, could throw you an interception, maybe not to the point of what Kevin Jennings did. I think he'll be a little bit more comfortable and safe with the ball. But I think about 2023 Drew Auer, he was safe, he was efficient, and he was conservative with the football. I think that's exactly what they've asked Maddox Madsen to do. That doesn't help you if you can't run the ball and you get behind the sticks and you get behind schedule, and that's what Penn State's going to try to do. In terms of the passing game, Cameron Camper at wide receiver, Latrell Caples as well. Decent wide receivers, but I don't know if they're going to scare Penn State's secondary. Tight end Matt Lauder, 43 catches for 523 yards, so a little bit of a size issue to deal with there for Penn State, but the linebackers for Penn State played very, very well against SMU. And I come back to that question of if you can't get the ball to Ashton Jeanty, Well, you'll get him the ball with a conventional handoff, excuse me. But if you don't have success with that, well, what else are you going to do? Jeanty only has 20 catches for 116 yards and 1 touchdown receiving this season. So it doesn't necessarily tell me that they have a developed screen game necessarily for him, or a developed game where it's, think about Alvin Kamara with the New Orleans Saints, where it's like, we're going to work you in the flat quite a bit. That's not the way that this offense is built. It is more built as a power running attack. So considering all that information, Justin, does that make you feel it's like, yeah, this is a situation where Penn State might not even have to blitz all that much? They can have a lot of fun with their front four. Or do you think it is a situation where Tom Allen's bringing a lot of pressure to either blitz the run or just throw Madsen off?
I think do a little bit of both, right? I think it just depends on the looks. If like they're trying to adjust to us, and we, like I said, that's why I said when we have like lower count boxes that we're kind of sending more pressure just to kind of fill those different gaps, and where they're just, or Madsen never just feels comfortable, and even when they're running the football, they never really have a chance to breathe. Just depending on the different looks, because I'm sure they're going to be adjusted based on what we give them. But yeah, I think that's that the game plan, or the winning game plan, stops. It comes around stopping their all pro talent.
Last thing about Penn State's defense against Boise State's offense, I had a chance to speak to TJ Pittenger on College Football Addiction on YouTube recently, and he was talking about the secondary for Penn State, Lockdown U, and I know you're the authority on this, but his point was, hey, the defensive backs for Penn State aren't that good this year. I will at least admit that this is not the greatest defensive back room Penn State has ever fielded. This is still a really good group of defensive backs at corner and at safety. I think the safeties especially are outstanding. But it's something you've always talked about, is that this is a symbiotic relationship between the defensive line, the front seven, and the secondary. And a lot of the success that was had against SMU, yes, if you're only going to rush 4, you better hold up on the back end. And that's the thing I've seen consistently throughout this season, is Penn State has the ability to blitz with the secondary. They can drop back and feel comfortable in coverage. They'll give you some, sure, but they're not going to get killed with the explosive play. What have you seen in terms of that maturation and involvement with that evolution, with Penn State's defensive backs as the season has gone on?
Well, I mean, I think it goes along with the defensive coordinator, right? We're talking about a symbiotic relationship. It starts with the conductor at the beginning, right? If he's calling you to kind of have a cap on the defense versus attacking and being a little bit more opportunistic, just based on how the different coordinators called the plays, whether it's like, hey, we're bringing the saxophones here, or the horns, or the drums. It's just like which positions kind of are highlighted throughout. I can't even say highlighted, but like put in those different positions, because like when you say like they played well statistically in the sense of not giving up much, and that's a major piece of playing defensive back. But the lack of explosives in the sense of turnovers and pick sixes, maybe we had one, but from on the secondary side, from that standpoint, I mean, I think they've been playing very solid football, solid plus football. You know what I mean? Like, so like I can't even say they've been like, I mean, yeah, it's just like they've been playing I don't say a lesser role in the overall defense, but like their stuff has just essentially been keeping the cap on the defense, which they have for the most part. You know what I mean? So I played in defenses where it's like bend but don't break, and you give up a lot of yards, but you got to make your plays within those different drives or those different opportunities that come about. So maybe that's just me being an apologist from playing in the defense. When you have to when you're called to play, I'm not gonna say softer, but you're called to like not give up the big stuff, right? And make sure we keep everything in front of us. And that's essentially how they play. And they've had shutouts, they had victories. I mean, the defensive coordinator was up for, I don't know if he won the Bortles, but he was up for the assistant coach of the year award. And so when you have those different type of things, it's just like, I just always try to get people to evaluate their criteria of what we're judging it on, because it's like you got to always look like, all right, what's the intent of this coordinator, what they're trying to use them for? And
True.
I think based on what they've been trying to do, they've been playing pretty damn good football.
Before we get into Penn State's offense against Boise State's defense, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Future Fans. Future Fans is a new brand that helps little kids become big sports fans through storybook-led activity boxes that help them understand a sport. Now, I know Christmas is come and gone, but the football season rolls on, and football really, as Justin, as you well know, it's 365 days a year in terms of the involvement with this sport. So the beauty of Future Fans is that it introduces the core concepts of a sport in ways that make sense to a kid. For example, instead of explaining something like the downs in football directly, which is hard enough explaining to a full-grown adult who has no understanding of the game of football, if you've ever tried to do that. With Future Fans, there's a beanbag toss game that has things like 4 tries and 6 points embedded into it, and then later the storybook connects that to football for the kid. Justin, this is genius. It was built by dads, and I know you as a parent appreciate a product like this that can help you and your child, or just kids in general, connect with this wonderful sport of football.
As a fan of sports, it always comes down to bonding, right? When you go to a game, it's a family outing, and it's always better when the kids understand the rules so they can really get into the game and adopt that fandom that a lot of us have as sports fans. So I think it's an incredible idea, even for the sports fan or the sports participant that wants to learn the rules and ins and outs to make you a more informed spectator or player of the game.
Future Fans is designed for kids ages 4 to 8 and the football fan adult in their life. As I mentioned, it's the holiday season. Hell, if you're making some returns right now and you got a little extra carrying around money, you want to get another gift for somebody, this is the perfect time to take advantage of that. Future Fans is only $49.99 at futurefans.com, and you can get a 15% off discount with the code Penn State, all one word, PENNSTATE. Penn State gets you 15% off. You can unlock a lifetime of memories around sports this holiday season at futurefans.com.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today.
All right, touching on Penn State's offense against Boise State's defense. This is where I think it's a little bit more interesting and kind of like, not exactly sure what is going to come out here. I could see this going a couple of different ways. Penn State against SMU, 14 points off of pick sixes. So you yield 24 points from your offense ultimately against SMU at home in 13-degree weather and 35-mile-per-hour winds. So, let's factor all that in. I saw a lot of people knocking Drew Auer. Oh, he didn't have that great a game. You try throwing in 35-mile-per-hour winds. See how it goes. Tyler Warren was quieter against SMU. I'm not going to chalk up everything to the weather. I think SMU did a good job in that they focused on him. And they wanted to make sure that Tyler Warren wasn't the reason Penn State beat SMU. Penn State ran the ball extremely well against Oregon, ran the ball very well against SMU as well. Do you expect to see Andy Kotelnicki do the same thing, commit to the run early against Boise State, and just go for body blows against the Broncos?
I think that's been his identity, right? Establish a line of scrimmage, make sure that that's somewhat malleable, so you can continue to go to the air in the second half, right? To kind of for those knockout blows, and essentially, like we say, those body blows is probably a good look when you got Tyler Warren and you just kind of take it into the middle of your defense. That's a pretty good metaphor there, but but no, that's how he's kind of attacked different teams throughout the season. Besides USC, is essentially take it to them physically, and once they get a little overzealous, start getting them on the grind. Sometimes even Drew creating a little bit and taking those shots down the field, and we'll see if guys can get involved and capitalize on it. So, I think that's going to be the key, especially. I mean, Boise State's been having a great year and they've been playing well, but just from a talent physics standpoint, we've been recruiting different levels of talent for the past 3 or 4 years. So hopefully, establishing that physical dominance is something that they can do in the first couple of quarters.
I'm very curious to hear what you think about this statistic and fact about the Boise State defense. They are one of the worst tackling teams in FBS. They miss
20% of the tackle. 6 of their top 7 tacklers are defensive backs. Now, that's not uncommon to see a safety lead a team in tackles, as you well know. Linebackers, it's much more common to see them in the mix. There's one linebacker for Boise State that's in that top 7 in tacklers. Everybody else is a safety or a corner. Thoughts?
Run the ball, make them tackle. Run the ball, make them tackle. I mean, that's a terrible stat for a coach. I mean, that's hard to play. It's hard to win if you're missing. I said win, like against good teams, right? Like when you're missing 20% of your tackles. But that means they must be opportunistic somewhere else if they're missing that many tackles and still being able to come out with victory. So with that being the case, yeah, make them tackle. And with our physical identity and the couple running backs and, Tyler Warren, I think we can establish that run and then open up the back end later in the second half.
To your point, Boise State's superpower on defense is they're second in the country in sacks. This is a talented defensive line. However, most of their sacks come when Boise State brings the blitz, brings additional guys. And they've been able to get that from the secondary. So a lot of credit to the way that this team is orchestrated from a defensive standpoint is that they're going to cause some trouble for Penn State's offensive line. But we experienced that when we watched the SMU game, Justin, is that's a good defensive line for SMU. But Penn State controlled the line of scrimmage. I never felt like, I'm curious how you felt in that first round game. It didn't feel like Penn State bullied SMU in terms of offensive line versus defensive line, but they controlled the outcome in that theater. What do you think Penn State can do against this Boise State team, given what we saw against SMU?
What can Penn State do against this Boise State team? I mean, they hit on all cylinders. I think it can get ugly, right? I think it can be another thing where people are like, what's up with these matchups?
Yeah.
But if we hit on all cylinders, and at the same exact time, Boise's been proven to be pretty explosive, and if they hit or find some areas, it could be a dogfight. But I think we should handle them from just a physicality standpoint pretty well. Like that's what I'm anticipating. And see what it looks like in the semifinals.
Boise State, second in sacks in the country, only to Ole Miss. And no disrespect to Boise State, but you did that large part against the Mountain West Conference schedule. So let's factor all those things in. I think that's important. For Penn State offensively, coming back to Drew Allar and Tyler Warren, I don't necessarily feel like this is a game where Tyler Warren has to be Superman, a la the USC game. What do you think?
Not necessarily. I mean, if it's open, like he can be, you know what I mean? I can see them trying to take away the run as well and just be like, all right, we can double Tyler Warren, just make sure everything else is buttoned up. But you never know. I mean, USC turned out to be an average team, and he kind of took over that game, right, full of athletes, if that's kind of their strong suit in this standpoint. You never know. Tyler Warren's, I wouldn't call him the jack of all trades, but yeah, he's something better than a jack of all trades. I don't like that concept.
He's a unicorn.
Let's go to the unicorn, right? And so, like when that's the case, I think you can use him plenty of different ways where he can take over the game.
Considering the way that this playoff is laid out, I've talked about a lot of people saying, oh, well, Drew Allar wasn't that good against SMU. And, I don't need to see the passing game do anything crazy in this. And if anything, the interesting part about expanding this playoff is that style points don't matter. I really don't care how you win the game. And if you do win the game, for instance, 38-10 against SMU, yes, you can pick it apart and talk about the 14 points that came from the defense. That's all well and good. But I mean, I know there are Penn State fans will hate to hear this, but it's just go 1-0. And that's James Franklin's mentality since he stepped foot on campus. And it makes it really simple that way when you just take it one step at a time and you could give a crap about what the public thinks of the way it went. It's like, did we win? Great. Moving on.
I mean, that's the key to a lot of successful organizations, right? Is keeping everybody on one mission, one goal at hand, and to not get sucked in by all the hoopla, the Fiesta Bowl, going to a tortilla eating contest or whatever that might look like at a normal bowl game. You got to stay locked in because we're all here, in this multi-billion-dollar business to accomplish something. And that's why some people say it's like football buildings are somewhat cultish. When you say that 1-0 mentality, where it's like, hey, we got to stay locked in here. This is what we need to do. This is next. Because you have to get 105 people now with the roster limits on the same accord to execute one plan when there's so many individualistic goals and aspirations that everybody are chasing when, the coach's goals are team oriented. So 1-0, yeah, like you said, it seems corny, but yeah, a group of guys on the same accord or a whole organization, sometimes you got to dumb it down.
Now, I know I just said there's no need to look ahead for the team, but like this is a podcast, so we will look ahead. If Penn State wins against Boise State, they will move on to the Capital One Orange Bowl in the College Football Playoff semifinal. That'll be on January 9th in Miami, Florida. They will play the winner of Georgia versus Notre Dame if Penn State's able to beat Boise State. Georgia, Notre Dame does feel like it's going to be that kind of heavyweight slugfest. Not saying that those teams are necessarily better than Penn State, just the way that those rosters are constructed. Their goal is going to be run the football extremely well and play really hard-nosed defense. So regardless of who comes out of that game, how do you feel about Penn State's chances if the Nittany Lions do get past Boise State?
Honestly, I feel very good about our chances against both teams because, like, even Georgia, if we want to play the brand name game, they're not the Georgia of the past,
True.
couple championships. If you just watch them play, like they lack some, can't say explosive players, but I guess say some big time playmakers. And the same thing with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is built more in that Goliath type, big, won't pummel you down. They have some decent athletes, but average football players, but a collection of a lot of them, right? Like everybody's at the size requisite, everybody's athletic, and it's a good discipline. Everybody's bought in, but it's an older group as well, right? Like when they get transfers, like they're always taking older guys, and so like that makeup of Notre Dame, I think we can also match up well with both teams. So like regardless of how those teams look on an overall basis, I think our matchups against those are much more favorable than even looking at. So like bringing that all into the view, man, look at that national championship here. And that's what I would expect. So I think we can definitely beat Boise State, and I definitely feel like we can beat Georgia and or Notre Dame.
One thing at a time. First up, Penn State versus Boise State on Tuesday night, New Year's Eve at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Get some coffee going because this could be a later one or it could be over early. Who knows? We're going to find out. But Penn State versus Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, the quarterfinal of the College Football Playoff, Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN in Phoenix, Arizona. We will have a full recap of that game right here on State of State.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.